Hello, Mr. Bialik, Mrs. Parnell, and anybody else who gets to listen to this. This is my story about what happened to me when we left for the reservation and on the way back and stuff. Let's see, we got to the church at about 5 o'clock. We were supposed to leave there at 5, and I got there and everybody else was there. And they were packing all the bags and stuff. And my friend Daniel and I climbed into Rich's van that Rich Lewis was driving, and Chris Anderson was the other chaperone that sat in the front. And Daniel and I and Renee and Kelly Allen and Natalie, Betsy Lindsay, and Kelly Griffith all got into the van, and then Rich said that one of us had to leave, and so Kelly Griffith got out and went into the other van with Eileen and Jim Ritter, not Eileen Wilkie and Jim Ritter driving, and Mike Camp, JB, Simone, Melissa, my mom's two students, and a couple, who else was in there? And Brian Hill, and I think that was it. And anyway, we set off on the road, and Daniel and I were in the back seat, and Chris wasn't in our van in the beginning. We drove by and we picked her up, and then as we went on, Daniel and I asked Rich if we could put a Steppenwolf tape in, and we put it in, and then Betsy and Lindsay got tired of that, and they took it out, and we started playing a card game, and then we played a trick on the girls in front of us, Kelly and Renee, with the cards, and then they asked us to play a game with them, and then Natalie and everybody played, and I kept telling Natalie, hey, I like you, you're cool, because she kept making all these funny jokes, and then we ended up at a stop. We stopped at McDonald's about halfway there, and we got out and we ate, and Natalie told me about her boyfriend, about what an asshole he was, and about how he never treated her right, and all of this, and told me about some experiences she had, and we got in the back of the van. On the way back, and Daniel sat up front, and she put her legs up on Daniel, and she laid down on me with her pillow and held her hand. And then we got to the Hotel at Needles at about 11 o'clock. And Danny and I went out and got a soda and called our parents and went to bed. And Betsy came in and told me that Natalie liked me and asked me a question about a story I'd written. And then she went to bed. Then the next morning, Jim got us up. And he took a picture of Daniel and I at 6 o'clock in the morning when the alarm went off, and we were really thrilled about that. Then he got me out and made me wash the van windows and took me pictures of me doing that. And that was when I discovered that this man would be taking pictures for the rest of his life. And so then we popped back into the van, and Natalie sat up in the front, and everybody was teasing us. We drove a block over to Denny's. And Natalie and Kelly and Renee and Daniel and I all sat at a table at Denny's. And from that point on, we were the Denny's group. And everywhere we went, we were the Denny's group, and we sat together, and we ended up with this little clique. And we looked around the Denny's restaurant and realized that it was only old people, like people over 60. And there were these two ladies sitting across from us that kept staring at us. And so I looked at everybody and I go, hey, you know what? I hated this. One time I went into this restaurant and like all these old people were staring at us. And it just really pissed me off, and so the ladies turned away, and we didn't have to deal with them anymore. And then we hit the road and went out back and continued on going. And Betsy and Kelly in my van, they got in a fight. And then we stopped at a pizza place, and the Denny's group went in, and I was talking with them all. And Natalie asked me about what Betsy had told me, and I told her. And she'd asked me if I liked Natalie and if I'd go out with her, and if she didn't have a boyfriend. I said, yeah, and Natalie said, how sweet, and started playing with my hair. And on the way up, when she was holding her hands, I tried to kiss her, but she moved me away and said that she had a boyfriend, and I said I understood. And then we went on to this other place that was really close to there, so Betsy could buy socks because she forgot her socks. And then Kelly and our Denny's group stayed in the van while Lindsay and Betsy and everybody else got out. We went to go get gas, and we were sitting at this gas station, and Rich got out of the van to wash the windows. And we watched this drunk guy crawl out of a bush across the street, and he came over. And at first he just looked at us, and he's standing in our van, like right where the door was, and he looked at us, and then he goes, he just looked, and he tilted his hat and didn't say anything for a while, and then he said, hello. And I said, hello. And he said, I was wondering if you kids could help me. I'm trying to find my way back to Salt Lake City. And he asked me if I'd ever been there, and I said, yeah. And he said that it was the prettiest place on earth. And then he started talking about Jesus and Tel Aviv, and that being the prettiest place on earth somehow. And then he told me that his name was Billy Lee. He said, Billy Lee, and he stuck his hand out. I shook his hand. I said, my name's Pat. I said, my name's Billy Lee. He said it again. He goes, Billy Lee. Billy Lee's a pretty name, huh? And I go, yeah. And then he shook hands and introduced himself to everybody else in the van. He goes, wow, we all have such pretty names. And we all started laughing. And then he goes, I'm a Billy Lee, and I'm a Yankee, and I'm damn proud of it. And then Rich came over and started talking to him and got him to go away. And then we got back in and we continued on all the way until that night when we got to a town right before. It was the last town before we hit the reservation. It was 2 miles out of the reservation. And Jim Ritter, the happy camera guy that I told you about that Danny and I shared a room with, he got out, and everybody else was out getting drinks and stuff except for Danny and I. We stayed in the van, and there were like 5 dogs that were like really, really thin, that were like starving, and he bought him a bag of dog food and took it out and put it in the middle of the thing, and they all shared that, and they were really happy. And then we got in and we continued going all the way into 2 hours into the reservation. And we finally got to the reservation, and there was a lady named Leilani waiting for us, and she showed us to our house, and we all got cleaned up and then went back to a room that we discovered was like the cafeteria where like all the students met. And she explained to us a little bit about the culture, and a little bit about the kids, and a little bit about what we would be doing. And then we went back, and Rich talked to us about what important stuff we were doing here, and told us that we needed to get some rest. And so JB and Brian Hill and I all sat out in the living room. We slept in the living room, and the rest of the boys went to the back part of that room, and girls were on the other side. There were 2 rooms on the other side, and they split up between them. And that was about it. In the van ride, Danny and Renee were like looking at each other kind of funny, and I was holding Natalie's hand again, but nothing big. And that was it for that day. When we went in for the principal telling us everything, there was like cookies and stuff, which was nice. And then I talked with JB and Brian Hill into the night because Betsy liked JB, and they were having this big thing, and Betsy had talked to me about it, and so I was telling JB everything she had told me to tell her, and Rich got mad because we stayed up 2 hours talking, and then we went to bed. And then we got up the next morning really early, and it was the big day. It was our first day of teaching, and we all got dressed and rolled up our sleeping bags and ate breakfast. We had the same breakfast every day. It was these rolls, and we ate that inside. Richard brought those for us. They were like a jelly-filled rolls. They were pretty good, but they got kind of boring because he would burn them every day in the oven. But that's a different story. And so then we kind of all got dressed, and we were ready to go. So we went over into the room that we were in the night before, where the lady explained everything, and all the kids were there. And I sat down at a table with Lindsay, and it ended up being the kindergarten table. And the little kids would just look at us, and I asked, and the one kid had a picture, and I asked him if he drew it, and he shook his head no, and he turned away, and they wouldn't talk to us. And then the girl that I was sitting with, Lindsay, from our group, that was also in our van and stuff, it was like a devotion time where they prayed and stuff. And then we got up and taught him, Father, I adore you, and did all the hand motions for it. and sang that, and they all watched really close. They were like really interested. They weren't like into all the clapping and stuff. They were a little bit shy about it, but they were all like really, really paying attention. You could watch them do it. And then the lady left, and this other lady came. She introduced all the staff, but we don't remember any of their names, or at least I don't. I remember some, but I don't remember what this lady's name was. And she ended up being the lady that was singing. And they passed out these songbooks that were all written in Navajo. And we sang in Navajo with the kids, and they all laughed at me because I couldn't say the words right, but it was pretty cool. They were really cute about the whole thing. And then by the time that was done, we walked back over, and I put my jacket down, and they took us around and gave us a tour of the school. And as we went into each classroom, all the kids introduced themselves to us, and they all said their names, and that was nice. And then we went back, and it was break time by that time. It took a while, and we had some popcorn, but I didn't. I went out to play with the kids, and I ended up playing dodgeball. It was really weird for a dodgeball. I never played it before, but it was okay, And then I went over to see Natalie, who was pushing a little guy named Troy on the swings, and you'll be hearing a lot about Troy. And then the bell rang, and that was when we had pee, and I walked inside and put my jacket down. I walked out, and the kids were already there. And it was the kindergartners and first graders. And they were all running around a big track. It was a big field of dirt that had tires around it. And they were running around that, and we put our hands out, and they came running by and slapped it. And I started running with a little boy, the Troy boy, and BJ. And BJ and his sister Melanie were the son and daughter. Melanie wasn't there, she was older, but BJ was there. He's a first grader. And they were the only two white kids in this school. They were the son and daughter of the trading post people that run the trading post. And we were running around, but about halfway behind the track, they had fallen behind. So I bent down, and they climbed on my back, and we started running. And then they go, "You're going to fall." And I go, "I'm not going to fall." And they go, "You're going to fall." And I go, "I'm not going to fall." And then they kicked my legs and made me fall. And I was so scared. I thought they were all going to be hurt. And I go, "Are you guys okay?" And they're like, yeah, again. And I started laughing. We just held hands as we ran all the way around the back. And we sat down. And then Chris Anderson said, "Okay." And this was our teaching group. It was me and Chris Anderson, Melissa Giangrasso, and Simone, and Daniel Tahita, and Mike Camp. And they go, "Okay, we're going to run relay races now." I go, "Okay, well, I'll take these three over there." And she goes, "Okay." And they divided up the rest of them as we walked away. As I started to walk away, the little girl that had come with me, who I found out name was Terry later, came up and grabbed my hand, and she'd never seen me before, but she decided she'd hold my hand, and that it made me feel really weird. And I ended up with her and Troy and BJ and a little guy and another guy named Calvert. There were four. And we walked to the other side of the field, and we ran the races, and the kids, they started to really get into it, and they were having a lot of fun. And then we walked back and played Duck, Duck, Goose. We got in a circle, and they all like to rub my head with my hair and stuff. They all like to rub my hair. And Calvert ran the fastest out of all of them. And then after that, it was time for lunch. And we all went inside, and we washed up and got ready for lunch. And as we were in the washroom, when we were lining up, Mike Camp and I taught Troy how to make the peace sign with your hand and told him peace. And he did peace for a while. And then we went Nate and I ate with the little girl Terry and him and an older woman that was there. And while we were eating, it was really funny because the little girl Terry looked up at me and goes, "Your eyes are blue." And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "They're really blue." And I said, "I know." And then I go, "Our boys' eyes are blue too." And he goes, "Yeah, but not like yours." I go, "We have a girl too." And she goes, "Yeah, but you have different blue eyes." Well, that's what she meant, but it was really funny. And I didn't know what to do. I thought it was really cute. And then for the rest of the day, we basically hung out. For the rest of the school day, we just hung out. And yeah, and then they opened up. Because my day was over, I helped them carry books and stuff out of the van that Rich had brought in the U-Haul into the lady's office, and then I sat talking with everybody, and then they opened up the gift shop for us so that we could go in and buy stuff. And Natalie walked in with us, and she saw a necklace that she liked, and she ran out, and she got her money, but I bought it by the time she went back, and I go, would you be upset if I bought you a necklace? And she goes, are you sure? And I go, yeah. She goes, you don't have to. Hell no, I want to. And she was like, well, yeah, I guess. And I bought it for her, and that made her happy, and she gave me a big hug. And then Danny came in, and we picked out earrings that we were going to get because Danny wanted his ear pierced. And I got a necklace, and we just looked around, and we found these, like, dishes that were, like, baskets, but we called them yarmulkes because they looked like giant yarmulkes. And then we went out, and Rich goes, okay, change your clothes, we're going sheep herding. So we went in, and we changed our clothes, and we get into the van, and this boy was showing us how to get there because it was his home when he was a 6th grader. And him and his dad were taking us out to do the sheep herding. And so we went out to do it. And we got to the Hogan, and there were little lambs that were in a cage. And then we walked to a pickup truck, and they put us in the back of the pickup truck, and those of us that wouldn't fit went in a van, but I was in the pickup truck. And they got us out, and I started talking with Natalie again, and we ended up walking the entire time and talking, just the two of us, and we'd stop and take pictures of all the cool scenery. And we talked a whole lot about a lot of really, really cool things, and we got to know each other really well. And it was really nice. The sheep smelled kind of bad, and they all had dreadlocks. But other than that, they were cool. When we got back, they told us that they put us into the vans, and they took us out to where they get their water, and they showed us that. And they took us by this Hogan that was built out of adobe that had taken, the guy said, 40 years to build. It took them 40 years to build, and after it was built, it was like 100 years old. So 100 years ago it was done being built, and 40 years before that it had been started. And we walked inside of that, and Lindsay got mad at me about talking to Natalie so much because I wasn't paying as much attention to her, and she was all jealous. And then after that we got back into the vans, and we cruised around, and he showed us more of the hillside. It was really pretty. And then we went back to his Hogan, and they taught us how to make fried bread. And we did that, and we ate that, and they had some mutton stew and some blue cornmeal, and I ate that. It wasn't very good, but I ate it anyway to be nice. And they took pictures, and they Natalie put my hair, the front of my bangs, up in a ponytail, so it looked really weird. And all the old Indian ladies thought that was really funny, and they all laughed at that. And then when we went back that night, we noticed that Daniel and Renee had been holding hands, and so we were kind of teasing them about that. And Danny told me he was going to ask her out, and she told me that she'd say no, but I ended up, Rich took us out into this, like, it was almost like woods where we were at, and he took us out there to do a prayer and being silent devotion deal, and it was very nice. And Natalie was crying during it, and Jim was taking pictures as usual, and it was really nice. And I walked up to Kelly Allen, and I said, well, if I want to come back out here and play my sax, will you come? She goes, yeah, and we'll bring Danny and Renee. And I laughed and was like, okay. And I went up and asked Chris, and she said to talk to Rich, and I asked Rich, and he said it was okay. And so as soon as we were back in, I just changed my sweatshirt, and we went out, and it was Kelly and Danny and Renee. And when I started playing my sax, Kelly and I walked over to another tree, and she was holding this tape recorder, and she recorded the song that I did, or I thought she was recording, but then it was only for 30 seconds, and then Danny and Renee walked over, and they laid there and made out the night for as long as we were there. And then Renee asked me if I knew a blues song, and we started making fun of him with a little da-da-da-da-da, when Danny kissed Renee. And we did this whole big song on it, and they got mad. And then we realized that the tape recorder, which wasn't on, which was just as well. But I said, all right, well, listen, I'll give you guys my sweatshirt to lie on if you can just shut up. And they were like, okay. And so I gave them my sweatshirt, but they still stayed close, which we asked them to move, but that was okay, and we played, and it was really pretty. And I was like, and then, so I figured, okay, that was enough. And we walked back, and I had the tape recorder in my hand, and Natalie was alone in her room, and I walked in with it in my hand, and she goes, where'd you guys go? And I sat down on a bed that was, like, really close to hers. She was facing me, and I told her, she goes, well, how come you didn't get me? And she took her legs and put one on the outside of mine and started rubbing. I said, well, I wanted to be alone. I've been really scared and confused about you the last couple of days, and I wanted to play about it. She goes, you think you've been confused? I go, yeah. She goes, well, can I hear it? And I go, well, yeah, but I want to leave when you do it. And she goes, why? And I said, well, because this was all improv about the last couple of days and about everything that's happened. And so if you wanted to, you could consider this a song that I did for you. And she said, oh, well, I'll do that. And I got up and gave it to her, and I walked away. And then I walked back in, like, partway through, and she was sitting cross-legged on the bed, crying, and so I just, like, backed out, because I didn't want to be there while she was doing it. The lights were out. And then in a few minutes, she came out, and her hands were, like, shaking, and she was crying. There was a tear in her eye, and she handed me the recorder. And I set it down, and I watched her walk back in, and then I got up and followed her back in. And she told me that it was really beautiful, and that if she would have gone, she probably would have been crying even harder. And I said, well, what is it, that's making you like this? Because she was shaking, and she didn't know what to do. And I said, well, is this, what is it, that you can do this much to me? Or she goes, no, I think it was that you did that much to me. And I said, oh. And she said, that was really nice. And I said, thanks. And she said that she had never heard anything like it before. And, what happened then? And that she never heard anything like it before, and then that she wanted me to sit on the bed across because she wasn't sure that she could control herself, and I wasn't sure what she meant. But then Kelly and Renee walked in. And, Renee said, I want to talk to you because Daniel told me he loved me, and I don't see how he can do that, And I said, well, Danny's. And I explained to her Daniel and the way that he loves people, and it was nothing that she could do about it, but that it was just something that he had in his head. And then we started talking about Laurel Hall, because all three of them went to Laurel Hall. It was a school I used to go to. And about what had happened to me there, and since then, and what it had made me now. And Kelly, and every time I tried to get closer to her now, she'd move away. She was being really funny about it. And and then they started talking about the tape, and you could hear on the end when I finished Kelly with "That's good." And then Natalie started yelling, "Understatement! That was sexy! Understatement!" And we all laughed. And then Kelly and Renee asked me, well, I want your phone number. We want to talk to you more. You're a really interesting person to talk to. And then Natalie goes, well, you promised it to me first thing I know, but yours is coming in a story. She goes, oh, you can tattoo it on my ass if you want to. And then she laughed and goes, with your tongue. And I go, okay. And I moved towards her, but she moved away. And she was just joking, though. And then as we all walked out because Rich wanted us to pray and stuff. And so we walked out and we did that. And I looked at her and I go, what? And then, we walked back into the room. It was just the two of us. She was like, I gotta go to bed now. And I go, I know. I go, no hug goodnight. She goes, if I hugged you goodnight, I wouldn't be able to to control myself anymore. And I looked at her and she went, you know what I mean. I laughed and I went, yeah. And then she walked out and I tried to hug her and she goes, no, no, no. And she ran away and she was really cute about the whole thing. And then the next day, we got up and we worked all morning. It was pretty heavy. This was Wednesday. We were carrying boxes into the basement and stuff. And we basically did that all morning. And then recess came, and we played with the kids. And Mr. Fox, and a little guy named Howard, had been Mr. Fox the day before in a game that we played. And he came running up to me, And he put his arm around my leg as we were walking away. He goes, "You're my buddy." And I go, "Yeah." And then Mr. Fox goes, "You're my buddy." And he came running up to me and he put his arm around my leg and he goes, "You got to come with me to my class." And I go, "Rich, I got to go with my buddy to class." Rich goes, "No, go tell your buddy that you'll see him later." And I said, "No, you tell him that I'll see him later." He goes, "All right." He said, "All right." And then we left to go horseback riding and we changed and we got, and then Rich said that we had to leave and I said, "Okay." And we got in the van to go out horseback riding and we got in the van and we rode for a long time, a really long time. And as we were out riding, Jim stopped to take a lot of pictures and he got really worried about all the gas because he was running out of gas, but he was happy because he had his camera. And we got to the horse riding place and they said that we had to go back at 3 o'clock and it was 2 o'clock and that we had to go dig around for an hour. And so we went to a tourist place, and when we went to the tourist place, it was really boring. We just walked through once. It was kind of cool the first time, but then it was really boring. And my muscles started hurting in my chest, and so I went over to lay down, and Betsy came over and she was talking with me about her boyfriend, and we talked about the Gulf War, and it was a really long talk, and it was really cool. We talked about a whole lot of really weird things, and she learned a lot. It was really cool. And then we got in the van to go back horseback riding, and we got there, and they told me to get on this big horse, and his name was Dipper, but it wouldn't go anywhere. I couldn't get to move, but then the guy asked me if I knew how to horse ride. I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, well, you take that one." And he gave Natalie the horse that I was on, Dipper, and he gave me this other one. I thought it was kind of ugly at first, but I didn't mind. And then we started going, and it just wouldn't stop. It was, as long as I wasn't pulling back on the reins, it would keep going. And the guy told me that it was a horse that he had rode most of the time, and I was like, "Oh, I see." And it was kind of cool. And Rich and I raced for the first little part on the dirt, and I would basically run whenever I got to the dirt when I had the chance to, and that was really cool. And then on the way back for the first part, Danny and Natalie and I raced a lot with this Indian boy, Jester. And then Natalie and I started talking, and because my horse came up and was rubbing against the side of her horse, and she goes, "My horse is hot for you." She goes, "My horse is hot for you." And I go, "I'm what?" And she goes, "Nothing." "I know that's because I'm hot for you." And she goes, "Yeah, I wish in my dreams." And I'm a musician. It's my job to make people's dreams come true. And I winked at her and I rode up again. And then as I went back, she was telling me about how Kelly was such a Chris preacher. Chris was her boyfriend, and I remember what a dick she had told me he had been. And then I go, "Well, if it really bothers you, I'm not sure how you'd feel about this, but if somebody like Lindsay or something says something to him, I'll call him when we get home and tell him that nothing happened between the two of us." And she looked at me and said, "If nothing happens." I said, "Yeah," and we continued to ride, and we laughed a lot, and we had a really nice, great time. And then in the end, the guy asked me if I wanted to run the horse, and I said, "Yeah." And so we ran part of it, and then I got up in the front with Rich again, and the guy asked, I go, "Rich, can we run for the last part?" He goes, "No," but then his horse started running, so we all started running, and him and I got back first. It was really nice with all the wind and stuff. And then we got into the van to go to the Thunderbird Lodge, and we all got on sugar highs. Kelly didn't sit with us, but it was in the Denny's crowd, but she was the only one, and so it was Natalie and Renee and Daniel and I, and we got out and had a talk in the bathroom, and then we went back and we were all on sugar highs. We got 18 Cokes and we put lots of sugar in it. The sugar jar was half empty by the time we left. And when we were in the van, they started singing songs, and every time there was an Alleluia, Daniel and I would yell, "Alleluia!" And so we formed this group called the Sexy Alleluias. It was really funny, and that was our name for the rest of the time. And Danny and I, in all the songs, we had the same line. We only said Alleluia, but we did it really well. And we said we were the sexy backup singers, so the name ended up being the Sexy Alleluias. And it was really cool. And then we went to another mission that was owned by the church, and we walked around there for a while, and then we walked back, and I walked out it, and I asked Rich if I could go out and play, and he said no, it was too late. And I said, oh, and I go, okay, well, I'm going to go call my mom. And he goes, all right. And I walked down, these people on the phone. I kept walking in and out. And then finally, the last time I told Daniel to tell Natalie to follow me out. I walked down, she said, hey, what's up? And I said, nothing much. I said, I was just wondering what it is you want me to do now. And what it is you want. And she said that she didn't know, that she was very confused, that she wanted me, and that she wanted to be with me, but that she had this boyfriend waiting for her at home. And she said, and I said, well, I understand all that, and I understand everything about that. I understand that you like me, and I understand that I like you, and I understand that it's this way. I just, there's part of me, I just want to know what you want me to do. Because I'm as confused as hell, I mean, after last night, nobody had ever had me playing that emotionally on my sax before. It had never been like that before. And part of me says to take you and kiss you now, and the other part says hands off. And I'm just really unsure what I want to do and what I'm supposed to do. She looked at me, she said, well, about the hands off thing, that would probably be best now. But that doesn't mean that I can't hug you. And she reached up and we held each other for a while. And then we said a lot of the same over again, and I ended up hugging her. So, well, let me hug you one more time before we go back in. And we walked away to the phone to try and call my mom. And, I said, I wish it could be different, because this is a really pretty place, and I'd really love to be with you here. She said, I feel the same way, but we just can't. And I said, I know. And then when I hugged her and we walked back in, and that was really cool. And then we went to bed. And then the next day, we got up and we were back teaching again. Except for this was like our last day in the classrooms. And we got up and we did more singing. And for the first part of the day, we worked. And they wouldn't let us go into the classrooms except for they let Simone and we taught the kids in the classroom how to sing Father, I Adore You. And we taught him a lot of things like that. And then I read the 6th grade boys' The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Once Simone went with the 5th graders to piano. And then when they came back, I took the 6th grade boys over and I taught the one guy piano. And then I had the 3 of them doing Sunshine of Your Love by Jimi Hendrix, because we had 15 minutes. I took pictures of them. I took a picture of them, and they were my music buddies from then on. And at all the recesses and all the lunches and stuff, I would be pushing the kids on the swings, and it was really fun. They all really liked me, and I'd have a good time doing that. And I did that for that recess, and it was really cool. I teased Natalie a lot about, whenever the kids would walk by, I go, that's Natalie, she's a pretty girl, and she thought that was kind of funny. And so we went on and we had lunch, and it was like the fried bread stuff that we had the night before, coincidentally, but it was still good. I liked that. I didn't like the cornmeal and the stew that we had the night before, but I really liked the fried bread. It was really good. And then we worked for the rest of the afternoon, but Danny and I didn't. We kind of ditched it and went in and cleaned the vans, and we kind of talked about what we wanted to do. And he said that he had talked to Natalie and that she had told him how much she wanted to be with me, but she couldn't because of Chris and them. And we got really confused, and we were sitting in the van, and then Betsy came up, and Kelly came up, and then Renee came up and asked to talk to Danny. And Kelly Allen left. And I was talking with Betsy about, and she and Renee told me that they both thought that Natalie was going to dump Chris when they were back. And I asked Natalie the night before, when we were talking about the holding thing and stuff, what she was going to do about Chris. And she said, well, when she got back, she was going to pull him aside and ask him how he felt about her. And that she'd be able to tell if he's lying. I said, well, what if he's not lying? And then she told me that she'd tell him that she wouldn't believe him. Or that she would tell him that she wouldn't believe him anyway. So we could be together. And I said, well, I'm not at the liberty to discuss that, but I walked up to Natalie earlier then and gave her a poem that I'd written for her the night before, and she had one for me. And it was a really nice poem, and it made me feel really good. And it was really nice. And so we were talking, and Renee came up and asked Danny to out of the van, as we had been cleaning the windows, and they were crying, and I watched him, and then she ran inside, And he turned around and he was crying really bad. And I go, Danny. And he goes, yeah. And I go, cry. And then we ran all the way to the edge of the property, down to the river, full out as fast as we could. And we just ran, and then we got there. And he told me that they had broken up. And I said, well, listen, Danny, you know, I mean, if the only thing that you guys regret about your relationship is that you had to break up because she was moving and she wasn't allowed to talk on the phone or date or anything, and didn't go to the same school. I mean, if breaking up was the only regret that you guys had, you guys did so much better than so many people I know. And in order for it to be this bad, it had to have been that good then. And he said, yeah, and then he felt a lot better. And then as we were walking back, I said, Natalie and Mike, and I said, Natalie, I want to talk to you when you're done with Mike. And Mike was like, well, you can talk to her now. I was like, no, it can wait. And so then I went in, and Renee looked really upset, so I told her the same thing I told Daniel, and she looked a lot happier. And then I walked out, and I talked to Natalie more, and I said, well, you know, how long, what's going to happen, you know, after I get back? You know, what happens if Chris changes? And she told me that she really doubted that he would change, that he would have before, that the relationship had been like that for the 2 months before, and that he was a really nice and sweet guy as long as you weren't going out with him. And she told me how much she wanted to be with him, and then we talked about Daniel and Renee and told her what had happened. And she said that Renee had been running and crying, and that it had been a big deal. But by the time we got back, they were talking, which was cool. And then we had community night. Or actually, we rehearsed music, but it didn't work out for something that we were going to do, but we never did it. And we did this community night deal where we cooked spaghetti and stuff, and I went inside and we ate spaghetti and garlic bread, and then I went outside to play with the kids. And I started pushing 1 on the swing, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. And then they teamed up, so at one point I had 8 kids on the swing. And it was really cool, because I told them that my name was Funky. And they said, Funky what? I said, Funky High. I go, I'm going to push you, Funky High. And I'd throw them up in the air, and their little faces were just so cute and just so incredible. It was just amazing. And I pushed them for a while. I pushed them until my arms were sore, and I couldn't push them anymore. And my muscle was strained and stuff. And I said, well, we're going to play a new game called You Can't Catch Me. And I ran away. And they all chased me into the field, and they tackled me, and they all jumped on top of me. And then we got up and played hide and go seek for 1 round, but it was only 1 round. And then I pushed them on the other round swing with the chains. It was like a big pole, and it had chains hanging from it, and the chains wrapped around it, but they were hinged. So I pushed them all on that, and then we went out and we ran around the track for a while. And Natalie came and started playing with us. And we played a game where y'all put your hands in and you untie a knot. It's really hard to explain, so I'm not going to try. And then we were all really tired, so I said, well, let's sit down and we're going to play a new game. We sat down, and they said, tell us a story. And so I told them the story about the apple tree and the boy, and the apple tree that loved the boy when he grew up, and gave him the place to sit on and stuff, and they really liked that. And then we went back to the swings, and they started playing volleyball, but they would, like, come over and take turns. And because I couldn't swing anymore, I sat down on the swing, and they all sat down on my laps, and we got going really high, and I'd twist the swing, and they'd be screaming, and I'd scream with them, and it was just the best time in the world. But then, like, they all had to go home, and only the big kids were left, and they were playing dodgeball with our big kids, the kids that had gone with us on our mission. And it was really getting out of hand. They were really, like, fighting. I mean, they weren't, like, they were about to fight, and they'd been calling each other names. And then, like, they all, like, went, and then, like, all the girls got really mad, and they ran out into the middle of the field, and they were, like, trying, like, and they were going to fight. And Natalie and I walked out, and Natalie started crying because, like, at that time it felt like all the work we had done at the mission, the whole 3 days we had spent teaching the kids, had just been flushed down the toilet. We didn't realize at that point that it was a different group of kids. And I held Natalie while she cried, and then when she was done for a second, I walked away from the whole big group of screaming people and got my sacks, and I went back and I said, Natalie, Betsy, and Kelly, you guys come with me. And I started to walk out to where we had been the night before, 2 nights before, with Danny and Renee, and where you could see the stars and stuff. And boy, I didn't know, it was the whole group followed, everybody in our group. I said, listen, you guys go out there and you guys all be alone. And everybody was there but Brian Hill. And they all went out, and I started playing my sax, and it all got really quiet. And they were really relaxed. And then Brian came out screaming, and they all left and went back to the room. And Rich, except for Natalie, and she stayed behind with me. I said that I didn't want to go back. And she went back to see what was happening. She said that everybody was inside and that all the other kids were gone. And we stayed and talked for a second more, and then we walked back, but I didn't. I stayed outside, and Rich and all the kids were talking to Rich on the inside about what had happened, and I could hear him talking. And then when he came out, I told him what had happened, and he said that it was good. And I kind of felt like I'd failed because when Brian Hill came back, they all left, and I thought that they were going out to fight again, and he said no, that I had saved a big problem because they didn't fight. Because of it, they were all really relaxed, and they just walked inside of the house, and that made me feel good. And then I walked inside and put my sax down, and everybody was just kind of looking at me, and I walked into Natalie's room, and her and Kelly Griffin and Melissa were there, and we stayed in there for the night talking about just the weirdest stuff. It was really weird. And then we went to bed that night, and we got up the next morning, and it was the day that we were leaving. And that day we had seen, before the community night and stuff, they put on a play for us that was really cute. And then the next day was the day that we had to leave. And the night before we all went to bed, we wrote them notes. And they had written us all these notes and drawn us all these pictures, and they were really, really good. So we wrote them all. There was an envelope with each one of their names, and we wrote them all notes and put suckers in their envelopes. And then we had breakfast with them one more time, and then we went to the service, and we sang the songs that we wanted to. And Kelly and Natalie got up and said, and Rich had asked 3 people to get up, and Natalie got up and said and she talked about what we had learned. Then we sang, and then Kelly did it, and then we sang, and then I did it, and then everybody was really, really crying, and then we were done with the service, and the principal asked us all to line up, and all the kids went by and hugged us, and they were just so sweet. I got the biggest hugs in the world from those kids, and it was just, and then we were walking back to the van, and Troy, the little guy I told you about earlier, he grabbed me by the hand, and I turned around and looked at him, and he looked up at me with his big face and big eyes, and held his 2 fingers up and said, "Peace." And I started crying again, and this little girl, Alicia, I'd been pushing her on the swing the day before, and she stopped the swing and put me on the swing and said, "Here, it's your turn. You look tired now, and you need a break, so I'm going to push you." And she gave Natalie her earrings, and she was being really sweet. And then we were walking away, and I said, "No, I got to have one more picture," when we were in the van, and I ran out of the van. And I went back into the classroom, and I said, "Come on, guys, we're all going to take a picture." And they all huddled around, and the teacher took a picture of us all. And then I looked at Terry, and I gave Terry a big hug, and I said, "I'm going to miss you." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Because you're my friend, and you're a really sweet kid." And she said, where are you going now?" And I said, "I got to go home." And she goes, "Why do you got to go home?" I said, "I have a mama and daddy." She said, "Well, you come home with me, and you can show my mom, me, and daddy." I started crying again. I just barely been dry-eyed for a couple seconds, and she made me cry again. And then I went back out into the van and said goodbye to Lonnie, who asked me to stay. And I said I couldn't, that I'd love to, but I couldn't. Rich wouldn't let me. And she told me to come back, and I told her she'd have a hard time keeping me away. And we got in the van, and Natalie laid down on me again, and everybody went to sleep for a while. And we headed up towards Monument Valley, but then we got there, and it was $250 a person to get in, so we didn't go. And we went up by Utah, and then we came down, and we just drove. We drove a while, just all the way. We stopped to eat at McDonald's, where Denny's group sat together. And I had a Happy Meal, and I teased Natalie some more, and we held hands in the van and stuff, and we drove all the way to Vegas that night. But halfway, almost all the way to Vegas, we were really, really sore. And so we started giving everybody back rubs, and we had a circle going where everybody was getting a back rub, even the drivers. And it was really cool. and I was giving really good back rubs, and I got a really good one. And we got to Vegas, and we went to like a roadway inn, and Rich said that we had 15 minutes to get ready, and then we were going to Excalibur. So we went to Excalibur, and the Denny's group sat together, and we had Simone and Melissa and Brian joined us. And I drew Miss Natalie a picture on the back of the placemat and gave it to her and told her to open it later. And then we went out to play games downstairs, and we played a couple games, and I won a Viking that I gave to Natalie, and she just thought that was sweet and gave me a hug again. And we went back to the room, and we took a shower and went to bed. We talked to Jim for a while, and he talked about cameras and Eileen, which was all he talked about. And then the next day on the CB, we asked him how many rolls of film he shot, and he said 16 of like 36 pictures each, which is really cool. And then we were on our way back again, and Natalie slept on me for the last time. She put her pillow on my lap just like she had done before, and she slept on me the last time and held my hand for the last time, and she'd given me her phone number and a note that she'd given me a little bit before, and we wrote a big long note. And then when we were coming through a canyon, we all got out and climbed on the rocks, and that was really cool. And then we just continued on driving, and then we hit the smog and stuff, and it was really nasty. And we dropped Chris off back at her house and went back to the church, and I helped Natalie carry her stuff to her car with her grandpa. And I called my dad, and that was it. I came home, and I guess that's my story. I don't think there's anything I forgot. Besides to mention that the scenery was just awesome. I mean, you'd look out there and you could see forever, and the only thing that would block your view would be these big rocks. And you could just see forever, and the clouds looked like Super Mario Brother clouds. It was so pretty. It was just undescribable. There was no way I could put it in the amount of words. And I wrote some good poems while we were there. Everybody in the band liked the poems that I wrote. That was cool. And I think that was about it. I called Natalie today. It's Sunday now. Got back yesterday, and I called Natalie today. And I guess I'll talk to her tomorrow and find out what happens with her boyfriend, Chris. And then that will conclude the entire story, I guess. I really learned a lot from this experience, just being with the kids. I learned a lot about life and the way they live and what it's like compared to the way we live. And that these kids it looks like they have nothing. I mean, compared to us, we like think that they're like poor and they have nothing, but their lives they're so much more happy, and they're just so incredibly lucky. And I really wish that I could have stayed longer. And the gratification I got out of it all, knowing that I taught those kids that much about counting and numbering and the music, and just that I'd made a difference, really made me feel really good. And I think it was a really good experience for everybody. I've had about a fraction. I mean, I had half the sleep that I would have had I added up all the hours, and I ended up having half of the sleep that I would have had on a regular week. And I did twice as much work as I do in a regular week, but it was well worth it. I'm really glad I went. It was a great. We drove a while, just all the way We stopped to eat at McDonald's where Denny's group sat together, and I had a Happy Meal, and I teased Natalie some more, and we held hands in the van and stuff, and we drove all the way to Vegas that night. But halfway, almost all the way to Vegas, we were really, really sore. And so we started giving everybody back rubs, and we had like a circle going where everybody was getting a back rub, even the drivers. And it was really cool. And I was giving really good back rubs, and I got a really good one. And we got to Vegas, and we went to like a roadway inn. And Rich said that we had 15 minutes to get ready, and then we were going to Excalibur. So we went to Excalibur, and the Denny's group sat together, and we had Simone and Melissa and Brian joined us. And I drew Miss Natalie a picture on the back of the placemat and gave it to her and told her to open it later. And then we went out to play games downstairs, and we played a couple games, and I won a Viking that I gave to Natalie, and she just thought that was sweet and gave me a hug again. And we went back to the room, and we took a shower and went to bed. We talked to Jim for a while, and he talked about cameras and Eileen, which was all he talked about. And then the next day on the CB, we asked him how many rolls of film we shot, and he said 16 of like 36 pictures each, which is really cool. And then we were on our way back again, and Natalie slept on me for the last time. She put her pillow on my lap just like she had done before, and she slept on me the last time and held my hand for the last time, and she'd given me her phone number and a note that she'd given me a little bit before, and we wrote a big long note. And then when we were coming through a canyon, we all got out and climbed on the rocks, and that was really cool. And then we just continued on driving, and then we hit the smog and stuff, and it was really nasty. And we dropped Chris off back at her house and went back to the church, and I helped Natalie carry her stuff to her car with her grandpa. And I called my dad, and that was it. I came home, and I guess that's my story. I don't think there's anything I forgot. Besides to mention that the scenery was just awesome. I mean, you'd look out there and you could see forever, and the only thing that would block your view would be these big rocks. And you could just see forever, and the clouds looked like Super Mario Brother clouds. It was so pretty. It was just undescribable. There was no way I could put it in the amount of words. And I wrote some good poems while we were there. Everybody in the van liked the poems that I wrote. That was cool. And I think that was about it. I called Natalie today. It's Sunday now. Got back yesterday, and I called Natalie today. And I guess I'll talk to her tomorrow and find out what happens with her boyfriend, Chris. And then that will conclude the entire story, I guess. I really learned a lot from this experience, just being with the kids. I learned a lot about life and the way they live and what it's like compared to the way we live. And that these kids it looks like they have nothing. I mean, compared to us, we like think that they're like poor and they have nothing, but their lives they're so much more happy, and they're just so incredibly lucky. And I really wish that I could have stayed longer. And the gratification I got out of it all, knowing that I taught those kids that much about counting and numbering and the music, and just that I'd made a difference, really made me feel really good. And I think it was a really good experience for everybody. I've had about a fraction. I mean, I had half the sleep that I would have had I added up all the hours, and I ended up having half of the sleep that I would have had on a regular week. And I did twice as much work as I do in a regular week, but it was well worth it. I'm really glad I went. It was a great